Washington, D.C., a special edition of the program. It's Tuesday, May the 27th. Let's get to the day's top stories. First up, new developments in regard to Joe Biden's mental decline. It now indicates that the former president was experiencing lapses in memory and cognitive ability all the way back in 2015. Surely left-leaning sources will try to deflect these claims, but we want to get to the bottom of this here on AVL. We'll have John Solomon in to discuss. And then the third week of the Diddy trial is underway, and the new developments allege a myriad of accusations against Mr. Combs. We'll have the details on the latest updates in the trial, as well as an expert to discuss. Further, we will talk about the big, beautiful bill and what it means not only for the economy, but for everyday Americans. All of this coming your way starting right now. Just last week, the House of Representatives passed President Trump's big, beautiful bill, 215-214, very close, but it passed. The big, beautiful bill is a sweeping multi-trillion-dollar piece of legislation that advances President Trump's agenda on multiple issues, including taxes, immigration, energy, defense, and the current national debt, a sticking point for many. Many Republicans are concerned with the levels of spending that the federal government already has, including the MAGA supporting senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson. But President Trump and his administration have repeatedly said that this bill, along with others in the future, will ultimately make the American economy boom like never before. From cutting federal government spending and raising the debt ceiling to further securing the border, this bill could be the key to the future of America. Here with me to discuss this is the Congressman from North Carolina 8, Mark Harris. Congressman, nice to have you here on the program. First of all, thank you for being here. Hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. This is a concern.
Thank you, Steve.
The spending here.
It's great to be with you.
Good. I'm glad you're here. I mean, a lot to talk about here. It got through 215, 214. But, you know, Ron Johnson isn't the only one looking at this bill going, whoa, it's a lot of spending. The way he projects it in the government accounting office is $2 trillion of additional debt every year for the next 10 years. That's $20 trillion and more debt piling up. And at some point, that dam bursts. I mean, we saw what happened in places like Greece and Portugal. Debt crises often are very painful. Austerity measures and everything else come to bear on the people. We don't want that in America. How do we get this under control?
Well, first of all, Steve, I really think Ron Johnson is saying some really good things, and I think that it's going to be important for the Senate to look at this bill. We want to make sure that they continue President Trump's agenda. We want to make sure that this bill passes. But this is one time that, frankly, there were a lot of concerns in the House of Representatives. We knew that it needed to go forward, and we knew that we needed to step up. The Trump tax cuts, getting those through are important. But this is a generational moment that we have when, through budget reconciliation, with just 51 votes in the Senate, we're going to be able to move this thing through. And I think it's going to be very important for us to watch what happens there. And I, for one, am hoping that they're going to be able to improve upon the bill that we sent over. There are a lot of wins in this bill, a lot of wins, very important things that have gotten done, all the way from taking the Trump tax cuts out further to defunding Planned Parenthood, to building the border wall, to making sure we have more ICE agents, making sure we've got more beds for this deportation that's taking place. All of these things are important, and it needed to pass. But you're right. We've got to get our spending under control. We've said it time and again. We don't have a revenue problem in government, in the federal government. We have a spending problem. And it's important for us to continue to reform some things. Some things got in the conversation. We had discussion on reforming Medicaid. We had discussion on reforming SNAP. All of those things that were part of the conversations. The Senate has an opportunity to look at it deeply and see what adjustments might need to be made, send it back. And I'm convinced with the Senate, if they're more conservative, we're going to be able to pass it in the House.
Now, one of the things, you're in district today, you mentioned before we came on today, and I've been hearing from people all over this country that are concerned, people that voted for Donald Trump, people that voted for Republicans in both the House and the Senate to give a majority in both. They're concerned. Here's something that keeps coming up. I'd like to know what you're hearing in your district, and that is no votes on DOGE cuts at all. And the people that are complaining about this say, look, We voted 77.5 million of us. We want spending cuts. DOGE has come along, and yet no votes to make permanent some of these DOGE cuts. What would you say to the people that are concerned about this?
Well, I think it's a timing issue on that as much as anything with the DOGE cuts. We have been so focused on the one big beautiful bill and getting it through with this reconciliation. As I said, this is a very important moment in time when it only takes 51 votes to reconciliation to get it through the Senate. That's going to be important. We had to get this work done. There will be some rescission packages, I continue to be told, that are going to be coming to us from the White House once we get through this process. And as those rescission bills come, we're going to be able to claw back some of that spending that DOGE identified. So, yes, that is part of the equation, part of the work that's ongoing, but I do think there's going to be some specific rescission packages, I certainly hope they're going to be, that are going to be able to help us make those cuts that DOGE identified in the waste, fraud, and abuse that's been taking place.
That's very concerning to people, obviously. And look, it's time that we get these things under control. It's time that we get the spending under control. We've heard it my whole life. My whole life I've heard people talk about, well, we've got to reduce spending, and somehow it always creeps up, Congressman. It always comes back, and people, I think, are tired of it. They want to see action. Now, having said that, you talk about the Senate. It's not just Ron Johnson. I think more concerning are people like Rand Paul or what's ever left of Mitch McConnell, which I'm not sure on any given day, but these are potentially no votes. You can lose 3, and J.D. Vance can still cast a deciding and tie-breaking vote. Do you think you're going to get it through?
I believe we will. I mean, the conversations that I've had with a number of different folks in the Senate is they want to see this passed. They know it's important. And in fact, conversations that I've had have been very good in the sense that they are for making the tax cuts permanent, but they also understand that we can't just grow our way out of this debt we're in. And that's the main point that we've been trying to speak. We want to grow the economy. The things we're doing are going to be extremely important. The president's agenda is going to grow the economy, but we're going to have to put in place with that growth the spending cuts in order to really bend the curve on this national debt. And at the end of the day, that's got to happen because, just as you said in your lead into this segment, all of the downside of what would happen if we don't get it under control is not what the Americans signed up for.
Yeah, absolutely true. Let me ask you about some other things. Donald Trump has based much of his administration, his campaigning on peace through strength. He just returned from Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, where the message was clear. Peace through strength, trying to bring peace to the Middle East, peace to Gaza, and, of course, an ongoing effort to bring peace between Russia and Ukraine. The president, obviously, very upset. I was with him at both West Point on Saturday and again at Arlington National Cemetery yesterday, and his message to Vladimir Putin yesterday was sharp. This comes after a rocket and drone attack on Kiev, and it seems that he's not getting through to Vladimir Putin. And he said the same thing as Zelensky's not getting it right either. A lot of frustration, it seems, on the president's part. And now he says to Putin, you're playing with fire. It sounds like a direct threat to Vladimir Putin. Sanctions could be in the works. What do you think is happening right now? What are you hearing?
Well, I do think the president is extremely frustrated, as you say, with Vladimir Putin and his response. And he's not overly overjoyed with some of the things that Zelensky has been putting out in his statements as well. But I think the president has made clear, he did it in the Middle East. I think he's going to begin to work with it in this whole Russia-Ukraine situation. That is not only bringing peace through strength from our strength as a nation militarily, but he is moving in a direction that has not oftentimes been taken, and that is using our economic strength as a powerhouse in this country in order to bring that leverage to bear on the situation. So I think you're going to continue to see that. I think he is, again, declaring peace through strength. I think as a leader, he has got the respect of the world at this point, and I think that's going to be very important as we move forward. And I believe he'll get him to the table. I know he's frustrated, and in fact, probably bordering on angry at what Putin is doing, because he's saying one thing and then he's doing something different, which a lot of folks recognize as nothing new for Vladimir Putin. But I think the president is going to call him out on it.
Yeah, the concern being that if the president issues sanctions against Russia, it tightens the tap on oil globally. It could push oil prices higher, therefore energy prices higher. And of course, going into 2026, if you have higher gas prices and energy prices, it would not bode well for the Republicans and for Donald Trump in the midterms. Now, having said that, I'd like you to weigh in on this, Congressman, because one of your colleagues across the aisle seems to think that she's going to be the chair of the Oversight Committee, that being Jasmine Crockett, who says she will be chair of the Oversight Committee, and they'll be going after Donald Trump with some gusto, shall we say. Jasmine Crockett, I think, for Republicans is the best thing on a daily basis for the things that she says and the way she conducts herself. But if the Republicans don't do well in the midterms, what if she did have a chairmanship? How frightening is that?
Well, extremely frightening. And I think that is the wake-up call, as if Republicans needed a wake-up call. Listen, we've got to make sure that we understand that every election matters. We put all of our eggs in 2024, and look what happened. We worked hard. We saw the nation rise up. 77 million Americans say, look, we're going to give you the trifecta. We're going to give you a Republican-controlled House. We're going to give you a Republican-controlled Senate, and we're going to put Donald J. Trump back in the White House. That was a critical election to at least get us where we are today. And by the way, while there's a lot of things about the One Big Beautiful Bill that are far from perfect, the reality is, when is the last time that you've ever heard of Congress cutting any spending? And granted, it's not been what we want it to be so far, but the reality is there are bigger cuts than probably in the last 50 years that we've seen Congress actually bring. So I say that in light of the fact that as we move into the midterms, everybody's got to understand what we are seeing, from AOC being the face of the party to Jasmine Crockett being chairperson of oversight, as she is alluding to. Listen, it is a wake-up call for all of us to not become slack. We've got to stay engaged, we've got to stay involved, and we've got to keep President Trump's agenda moving forward.
What we'd like to see is spending levels go back to 2019, prior to all the COVID spending. And because what happened is they ratcheted up the spending, they being people on all sides in many ways. But we can pull it back now. It's not COVID anymore, thank God. Congressman, great conversation. Always enjoy speaking to you. Come back anytime.
Steve, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you, sir. You too. There you go. Congressman Mark Harris from North Carolina. Now, coming up after the break, Jake Tapper's book. Yeah, Jake Tapper's self-righteous book. Biden's decline, according to the book, started well before 2020, as if we didn't know that. It's a revelation to Jake, not to us. More after the break. is not going to surprise you at all. Joe Biden is apparently a lot worse for a lot longer than has ever been discussed previously, except on shows like this one, because, of course, we're saying, look at that. That's not normal. He can't act that way. He's falling off from stationary bicycles and so forth. But according to this new book, Jake Tapper's book, Original Sin, they've documented Biden's medical and physical decline beginning back in 2015. Also, in recordings of discussions with Joe Biden's ghostwriter in 2017, he was deteriorating then. Apparently, after his son Beau died, he just went to pieces. Joining me now is the host of Just the News, No Noise, right here on this network, John Solomon. John, nice to see you here today. And look, 25 years ago, I left the news media, but 25 years ago, I had enough. I thought they were dishonest. I thought they were shallow. What Jake Tapper has done here is a remarkable excavation, going even deeper into embarrassment. Look, he covered this up. He was among those that would denigrate people like you or I if we questioned Joe Biden's ability to do the job. He defended it, insulated it. And then he comes out and writes a book, oh my gosh, Joe Biden, he was deteriorating. It's not news to you and I, John, but apparently he's selling books. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to journalists everywhere, if he can even be considered a journalist. What do you say?
Well, listen, he says that he's unraveling the cover-up of that Joe Biden was really bad in 2024, but by trying to focus people on that and saying that the original sin was that people let him run in 2024, he's covering up the real proof in his book that the original sin actually went back to 2020, that Joe Biden was already in a state of decline when he ran in 2020. That basement campaign was an effort to mask that. You can put the pieces together from the things that you just said. You can see him disassembling in his interview with his ghostwriter in 2017. In 2020, for some media interviews, they were using a teleprompter. What politician needs a teleprompter to do an impromptu interview? You could clearly see that Joe Biden was there. And if Jake Tapper was really being honest, he'd say the original sin was letting Joe Biden run in 2020, not trying to make it what everyone now agrees the 2024 debacle of the debate was. But inside his book, there's the proof that actually undercuts the theory of his book.
Yeah, the real crime here, John, as far as I'm concerned, are people like Jake Tapper impersonating journalists. That's the real crime here, and passing it off as fact. And it's not just Jake Tapper. It's Chuck Todd. It's Scott Pelley, who gave a vicious speech at Wake Forest over the weekend. You know, when I grew up, 60 Minutes was the gold standard. I mean, you would watch 60 Minutes on Sunday night, and I see Scott Pelley go out there and say, basically declare himself and journalists a victim, that they're under attack. I'm like, whatever has happened here with this book and everything else, is it not self-inflicted, these injuries?
It is, and it began with a lack of curiosity in order to carry out their own political ideologies, which, by the way, in earlier generations of journalism, we resisted. You know, everybody has an ideology, we know that. But when you crossed into the newsroom threshold, you crossed that threshold into the newsroom, you agreed to put those political sentiments aside while you did your reporting. But the last decade to 20 years of that, maybe 25 years ago, that went away. And then to sustain your beliefs, you suddenly give up your curiosity. You're just not curious whether that laptop is real for Hunter Biden. You're not curious whether it's a little suspicious that Hillary Clinton came up with the whole Russia collusion thing. You're not curious that Joe Biden needs the Easter Bunny to show him out of the White House, but you're not curious if he's mentally in trouble. I think that those things are the downfall of journalism. First, the loss of neutrality. Everyone's got a personal opinion, but you kept it out. And then the lack of curiosity. And that allowed these false storylines that we've been through the last decade, particularly in the era of Trump, to just sustain themselves to the great detriment of news media. Nobody trusts news media anymore, not the traditional media. They don't. They trust places like Real America's Voice.
Yeah, you know, and I look at people like Walter Cronkite, Mike Wallace, Morley Saber. They were all Democrats. We know that. But they were honest about the job they did. Mike Wallace would go out there and bust people into pieces. He didn't care, Republican or Democrat. He wanted the truth. Didn't matter, right? And that's the real test for me. So if what we're saying here is, go back to Jake Tapper's book for a moment here. Everything that I think is in there from 2015 is right. When Beau Biden died, Joe Biden began to erode, for lack of a better word. And because of that, by the time he got to 2020, he was diminished. That's why he was kept in the basement. That's why they kept him out of, interviews. That's why they did certain things in teleprompters, like you said. So the real question now is, if he wasn't in charge of his faculties, then how did he run an administration, and how suspect is that auto pen? Who was really pulling the trigger?
Those are really important questions. I suspect that Joe Biden still made a lot of the decisions in his presidency, and that's probably why his presidency was such a failure. All throughout his career, he was on the wrong side of so many issues, right? So I think the fact that his track record of making bad decisions carrying into his presidency says he probably was still making a lot of decisions. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, could you count on him in case of a war thing? Could you count on him at the end to make the right personal decisions? I think not, based on what we're learning. And that is an enormous scandal. The American people's will was usurped by people who hid the fact that maybe Joe Biden wasn't there all the time. For all those who sustain that false story, inside an administration, there should be some legal culpability. And for all of those in the profession that decided to look the other way or pretend otherwise, there should be a corporate culpability. There should be people fleeing those sites and coming to Real America's Voice or Just the News. Yeah.
You know, it reminds me, there was a commercial by Hillary Clinton. If the phone rings at 3 in the morning, who do you want to answer it? I want somebody to answer the phone. Somebody who's, capable and competent, right? A couple of things before I let you go, though. We've been talking a lot these days about the big, beautiful bill, of course. A couple of things in there that I don't think people are aware of. The REINS Act you just mentioned to me a moment ago. There's a tax on EVs and hybrids. What can you tell me about the REINS Act, first of all? What is it and why is it important?
It is the ultimate regulatory rollback. It makes regulators justify their regulations on multiple fronts before they can be enacted. In other words, did Congress really authorize this? What is the actual cost? Does the cost outweigh the benefits? It is an enormous common sense check against the regulatory state that right now you don't have to worry about. Donald Trump's not into over-regulating, but a future Democrat president will now run into this if this law is passed. It's designed to put a check on the regulatory state based on the recent court rulings of the last few years. And Jim Jordan worked on this, got it in the big, beautiful bill, and it was one of the last additions before it went to the Senate. It could be a game changer for cutting down the regulatory state. The gas, or the tax on electric vehicles and hybrids, people who bought those aren't buying as much gas, so this is your way of getting to pay gas tax without buying gas. We're going to tax you. I think it's a concerning thing, though, because it really is a value-added tax. It's a sales tax on cars that's implemented every year. I haven't seen something like this in Congress before. I hope it's not a trend line.
The big goal is to put these little boxes in your car so they can charge you every mile you drive, and therefore they call it a road tax. That's the real plan here, John. Appreciate it, John. John Solomon, justthenews.com. You can always find out more, sir. Thank you, as always.
Good to be with you.
There you have it. John Solomon, everybody. Coming up after the break, big names, Obama, J-Lo, and more dragged into Diddy's high-stakes sex trafficking trial. Oof, it's getting ugly out there. Details coming up. I'm just going to apologize right now. I mean, we have done our best to avoid this next story for the most part over the last many weeks, but at some point, it is so beyond the pale what's happening. You just can't not report it anymore. When it comes to human trafficking and abusing people, well, sometimes you have to report it. It is week 3 now of the Sean Diddy Combs explosive trial and sex trafficking, racketeering charges, RICO charges. It's been drawing national attention as shocking, and I mean shocking testimony. We can't even discuss it all here on this program. Several big-name celebrities, including Usher, Jennifer Lopez, and former President Barack Obama, their names have come up. Biggie Smalls have been referenced in court, too. The trial, which kicked off with jury selection on the 5th of May, and opening arguments were on the 12th of May, and it just continues on. Tawdry doesn't even begin to cover it. Join me now to discuss this is the former Assistant Secretary of Defense and Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Cully Stimson, who is no more impressed to have to research this than I am. But, Cully, here's the thing. It's an underbelly of the entertainment industry, and we need to expose it. I'm sorry I had to use that word, but that's what we really need to do. These people were monsters. These people were animals, Cully. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. And, you know, you have to put a spotlight on it. I mean, sunshine is sanitation here, and clearly that we need some sanitation here. Where would you like to begin?
Well, why would we be surprised that rap singers who glorify misogyny, treat women like dirt, who glorify gun violence and thuggery, are actually involved in that themselves? And he's charged with a RICO, a racketeering conspiracy trial. His organization was the funnel through which all of these freak-offs and sex parties lasted for years. We've all seen the video of him beating Cassie Ventura in the lobby of that hotel, but it is much worse than that, Steve. And so it's a gritty, grimy, nasty trial. Of course, he's presumed innocent, but it's not looking good for him.
So human trafficking, I think that that's the thing. Look, there have been a lot of movies and reports and documentaries about human trafficking in the last few years, really bringing into people's consciousness of how bad it is. And America is about the worst place for a lot of these things because Americans have money. They'll buy people to use those people however they see fit. So exposing this is incredibly important. So the human trafficking portion, to me, I think is key to convicting Diddy. Is it going to happen? Is that element of this crime, do you see, is the prosecution making its case?
Yeah, and there's a lot of evidence to make that case. And as you know, I used to be a prosecutor doing homicides and violent sex crimes. And here, under the RICO theory, you can bring in all sorts of evidence that you wouldn't be able to bring in another trial, like admissions of a co-conspirator, other hearsay evidence. But here, the gravamen of the government's case is this. He used his companies and his fame and fortune to set up sex parties and brought in women from out of state and male sex prostitutes to have them have sex, gave them drugs, forced drugs on them, and then silenced them through physical force, beatings, and all the rest of it, and then paid people off when they threatened to narc. And then he also videotaped a lot of this stuff and used that as blackmail while he was pleasuring himself while they were doing these actions. It's disgusting. It's an outgrowth of a lot of the lyrics that I've read that he's done in his songs. But this is real life, Steve. And so this is the real deal. And I suspect if there are women on that jury, and I don't know what the breakdown of the jury is, there's going to come a point where they're just going to say no mas. They're done with this.
Yeah. So if you were going to handicap this, and look, you've been a prosecutor. There were cases I'm sure you thought you were going to win, you didn't. In cases you weren't sure about that you did. What are the tea leaves? What's your gut tell you here, Cully?
He's going to get convicted of something. I don't know how much. The defense is the obvious defense that this was all people who engaged in consensual behavior. They loved being around the Diddy and the sort of buzz that he represented, and this was all consensual. But there comes a point when you beat the crap out of somebody and you kick people and you drug them and you use videotapes where you cross the line from consensual weird sex stuff to non-consensual crimes. And I think he's going to get convicted of something, if not a lot of things.
Cully Stimson from the Heritage Foundation. I always appreciate your input, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
We'll see how this plays out. Of course, we'll have Cully back when we get the results of that trial as it drags on. Tax day may have passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble it's just beginning. If you missed the April 15th deadline or still owe back taxes, the IRS is ramping up enforcement. Every day that you wait will only make things worse. With over 5,000 new tax liens filed every single day and tools like property seizures, bank levies, wage garnishments, the IRS is applying pressure at levels we haven't seen in years. Increased administrative scrutiny means collections are moving fast. The good news? There's still time for Tax Network USA to help. Self-employed or a business owner, even if your books are a mess, they've got it covered. Tax Network USA specializes in cleaning up financial chaos and getting you back on track fast. Even after the deadline, it's not too late to regain control. Your consultation is completely free, and acting now could stop penalties, threatening letters, and surprise levies before they escalate. Call 1-800-905-8000 or visit tnusa.com/rev. You may have missed April 15th, but you have not run out of options. Let Tax Network USA help before the IRS makes the next move. Coming up after the break, more AVL. That's straight ahead. At big changes that could impact what we're doing here in the United States when it comes to the big beautiful bill. Gotten to the wrong place here. I'm going to catch up here. Don't worry, guys. I'm going to catch up. I know. I can't see it. Joining me from the Heritage Foundation, Richard, how are you today? I've lost my place here. I don't care about any of this now. Good to have you here. Greatly appreciate it. You know, I'm in a new studio. These things happen. I'm going to bust my way through it.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. All right. So let's get started here on what you're talking about. The real trouble beginning is, I'm going to get this here. I'm going to fix this. Stick with me 1 second. There you go. 1 second, folks. I apologize. These things happen. All right. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the tariffs on the European Union. 50%. That's what Donald Trump has threatened to impose, right? 50%. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, right? But he puts it out there. the European Union panics, as they should, and usually they cave in. That's what we've seen from the other folks so far. And what do you think is going to happen here? Is he really going to do it? He's pushed it back, I think, to July now. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right. I think they're already starting to cave. So they had been in negotiations with the president off the first round of tariffs, and now Trump had come out and said that there was no progress. There was lots of daylight, and that he was just going to put the 50% tariffs on. The truth is, under the hood, there's actually been a lot of progress and a lot of things going on. So I think he said that to kind of put a fire under them to get them to really move. And of course, the new tariff threat really got them to move. So he'd originally said, look, tariffs are coming in June 1st, rather. Now he's moved them to July 9th because they came to the negotiating table. And, there's a whole mess of regulations they put on our products. They prevent our exports from getting there. They're also trying to put a digital services tax on the things that we actually run a trade surplus in. So I think these are all things of IP violations that are on the table to negotiate that I think they're actually going to make some progress on, in part because of these new threats.
Yeah, let me ask you about this, because there are several major trading partners that are incredibly important. You've got the EU, China, of course, India, of course. But Canada and Mexico here close to home. Canada's our biggest trading partner, right, on many things. And I don't think we've worked out a deal with Canada either. So my question is, where are we on these tariffs? If we don't work something out with Canada, the pressure will ramp up on Mark Carney. Mark Carney will threaten, but they don't have the financial ability to go toe-to-toe with the United States. Nobody does. What does it mean for Canada going forward?
Oh, absolutely. Well, one of the disturbing things here is that I think Carney's kind of secret playbook on this is the cozy up to China, of all people. Part of what's been going on here is the Canadians had wanted to build a pipeline east-west so that they could get their crude oil not south into U.S. refineries, but west out to their ports to go to China. And that's part of what's the negotiation here. So I think you're right. They don't have the wherewithal. Neither does Mexico. Both have already caved a lot when it comes to border security and stopping fentanyl from coming into the United States. Those are, of course, good things. But I think you're right, though. Look, tariffs have caused harm on both sides of the deal. And it's important we actually get deals and we actually get real victories here. But, for the meantime, we're still in negotiation. Yeah.
Yeah, here's my question, because, Mark Carney has this secret deal, pipelines and so forth. Mark Carney is out there saying that he wants to follow the Paris Accords and every other accord that's ever come down on the Green New Deal, the bunny huggers and the tree lovers and all of these Green New Dealers. He wants net zero. If he wants net zero for Canada, it's going to be a disaster. And talk about secret plans. I've got this theory about Donald Trump. And maybe it's crazy, Richard, but I'm going to bounce it off of you. Donald Trump started calling Canada the 51st state to create that Canadian nationalism and get Carney elected, because he knew if Carney got elected, Alberta would say, we don't want anything to do with this. The day after the election, Danielle Smith, the premier of Alberta, said they will hold a referendum in 2026, next year, if they get the signatures, for Alberta to leave Canada. It may have seemed crazy for Trump to call it the 51st state, but if Alberta leaves Canada and has an alliance with the United States, we win, they lose, and Donald Trump comes out looking like a genius.
Well, I think you might be right about that. And it's not just Alberta, right? There's a few other provinces out there that are conservative, that have energy resources, that are tired of exactly what you're talking about, the green communism that Carney and people like him represent in the Canadian government. And, beyond that, Trump is trying to stir up these movements globally, trying to get people who believe in Western values, people who actually believe in free societies and free markets, and get them out from under the clutches of this global woke greenism that Carney is absolutely a poster child for. So you might be very much on to something there.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump, crazy as a fox, is what I think in this one. Shake Alberta loose, and then you can put in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and if British Columbia wants to play ball, they can come along too. Richard, greatly appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
There you have it. All right, after the break, more America's Voice Live, so don't go anywhere. continues to be the big, beautiful bill. It is the number one thing people are talking about. It has the most impact potentially going forward. And one of the key aspects covered in this bill has to do with no taxation on overtime, tips, and interest in some auto loans if the cars are manufactured in the United States. Furthermore, the bill proposes lower taxes for businesses by allowing them to deduct up to 23% on items or services essential for the production of products, which invokes business owners to further develop and upgrade their headquarters for increased productivity. Capital investment is what we're talking about here. President Trump and his team might have won the floor, but the battle is still ongoing, as now they must convince the Senate to get on board. And there's a lot of spending questions there. We've heard Ron Johnson from Wisconsin say he's a no. Rand Paul is a no. Mitch McConnell, whatever state he is in, is apparently a no. Here to discuss this with me is the economic strategist, Frances Stacy. Frances, nice to see you.
Yes, nice to be with you.
All right, so look, the spending here is massive. I mean, it is massive. It would add $2 trillion to our debt each of the next 10 years, so says Ron Johnson. The very pro-Trump senator from Wisconsin, he says he's a no, unless we can get some things figured out. Why is it so hard to go back to 2019 spending levels? That's where we should be, right? Pre-COVID.
Yes, so COVID reset something. So what a lot of people don't realize is that fiscal spending provided most of the liquidity for the marketplace post-COVID. Obviously, that monetary policy added a ton to the balance sheet, and then the Fed started tightening by raising interest rates, which reduces liquidity eventually in the economy, and then they started tightening up with the balance sheet, letting those bonds kind of roll off the balance sheet. So what happened was fiscal spending stepped in, and it was the primary source of liquidity. So we didn't get a recession after a huge amount of tightening, raising those interest rates drastically and having them higher for longer. And one of the reasons is because the fiscal spending stepped in and provided excess liquidity. So the problem that we have is when government spending is also, spending is taking on debt. There is no debt and cash unless you're talking about coins. Coins really are such a tiny percent of the of the money supply. So all spending is debt. So what happens is when you spend, you enlarge the system and you enlarge the liquidity, but you also enlarge the debt. So one of the catch-22s of trying to reduce spending is that now you have all of this new debt to service. And so that's one of the challenges of trying to go back to 2019.
Is there a way to do it? Is there a way to cut spending? I mean, look, I thought at one point that $25 trillion of debt was the point of no return. Maybe it was, but we continue to push on. At some point, we face a debt crisis. In Greece, when they had their debt crisis a number of years ago, people that had more than $1 million in savings, everything over $1 million, the government took half the money. Yeah. And if you don't think that can happen in America, you're kidding yourself. If this government decides that people, you've got too much, Johnny down the street doesn't have anything, he didn't save any money, but you did, they're going to come after your money, all of it potentially. I mean, this is not some theory. This is what governments do, including ours if necessary, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. Ray Dalio has done the number crunching and the math, and he says if we don't get our deficit spending down to 3 or 3.5% of GDP, then we will fall off of that proverbial debt cliff. The reason that the United States hasn't fallen off of a debt cliff when he's delineated 48 instances where other countries have is because we have that special, status as the world's reserve currency. Now that's being a little bit threatened, and should we lose the world's reserve currency, then modern monetary policy and modern monetary theory and all of those things go out the window because you don't have demand for the bond market. And if you don't have demand in the bond market, then nobody wants to fund something, and then that's when you have yields go up.
One failed auction, right?
Yeah.
One failed auction of bonds, and everything changes.
That's right. Everything changes, and you're right. So here's the catch-22, and this is the problem to solve. If you don't reduce spending, you increase the probability of going off the debt cliff because debt is onerous in the sense that it grows and it compounds. But if you do reduce spending too drastically, you cut the liquidity in the system below the threshold of where debt can be serviced, and you can force a credit crisis. So this is the catch-22 that we're in, and the 10-year is the thing that is that Trump is now watching very carefully. And that really is the leverage that, other countries have on us. We have all the trading leverage because America consumes 30% of the world's consumption. And those countries all have surpluses of items that they need to sell to somebody, and only we can absorb that. But their leverage really is to dump treasuries. They own 30% of our treasuries. And so that's the fine line that we have to walk with this bill.
Can we get to 3 or 3.5% of GDP? That's the question I have, listening to what you've told me. Last question.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Ray has done the math. Elon is working to do that with Doge. One of the very interesting things about the math that Trump did for the reciprocal tariffs on Liberation Day is it actually took the numbers from last year of deficit to GDP and, all things being equal, raised the revenue enough to get us down to 3.5% GDP, deficit to GDP. And so those tariffs aren't going to stick, but that's what he was looking to do because that's the only way to reverse engineer the math that he did. So we know that 10% tariffs across the board is really the floor on the tariff negotiations. Those are the highest tariffs since 1938. And that is tariff revenue that is going to come in. And that's the only thing that justifies keeping the tax cuts in place and potentially, doing these other tax cuts, no tax on tips, et cetera. So, yes, I think we can get there. And I think we do have to cut. We just can't cut drastically. We have to do it we have to taper off slowly.
Francis, I hope you're right. I hope we can find that 3.5%, because otherwise we're in real big trouble. Not so much for me or you necessarily, but for our kids and grandkids, it'll be an ugly transformation. Francis, Stacey.
Agreed.
Come back anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Now, she just talked about it a little bit. In July, there's going to be a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio. The bloc of emerging superpowers, including China, Russia, India, and Iran, meeting with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global currency. It would be a disaster. It's called the Rio Reset. BRICS nations are pushing forward with their plans. A global demand for U.S. dollars would decrease, bringing down the value of your money in your savings, and it won't transition overnight. But the Rio Reset in July is a pivotal moment when BRICS objectives move decisively from theoretical possibilities toward inevitable reality. Learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA and precious metals. Claim your free information kit on gold by texting America to 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of satisfied customers, let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation information kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text America 989898. Do that today. After the break, a story that will remind you of how wonderful America is, and, of course, answers to America's Voice question of the day. Do you think President Trump's big, beautiful bill will make it through the Senate? We do it every day here to put a smile on your face. What makes America wonderful? A lot of things, but we want to remind you every day about how great this country is. Today's story comes to us from Cookeville, Tennessee, where a blind mother of 5 was able to overcome her adversity with the help and support of her family and staff on her college campus. Amanda Juden started her pursuit for higher education later in life, and motherhood and the responsibilities attached to it forced her to put those dreams on hold. Furthermore, she was diagnosed with a degenerative disease known as retinitis pigmentosa, which affected her eyesight to the point where she became legally blind. Undeterred to give up, Juden traveled to Colorado's Center for the Blind to learn the skills necessary to navigate the cards she had been dealt. After finishing the program, Juden enrolled in Tennessee Tech, where she went for a degree in organizational leadership and graduated with honors to boot. Dealing with a life-changing disease is tough for anyone. So much so that giving up is almost expected. But with the help of the staff on campus and Amanda Juden's determination and grit to persevere in the face of adversity, well, it's evident of American values like determination and supports the notion of what makes America wonderful. Great story, and congratulations to the college graduate. Here's the question of the day. Do you think President Trump's big, beautiful bill will make it past the Senate? Well, Helen Hardin writes this: I hope so and pray, but no, I don't. Buddy Eskew: sorry to say it, but with those anti-government American politicians, it will take some big cash payoffs. That is all they understand. Tommy Stutzman: hey, Tommy, maybe, just maybe, that way you're never wrong. Maybe just maybe that he's always right. Sam Folds III: I don't have a lot of faith in our linguini-spined senators, and neither do I. One more, Joe Hackle: once the self-important senators finish grandstanding, yeah, maybe. All right, we'll leave it there for today. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Truth and Instagram and all of that stuff. Stay in touch. And don't forget to join me tomorrow morning as we kick off live programming right here on Real America's Voice. 6 a.m. at the Steve Gruber Show. We'll kick it off every day, and then I'll be back here to chat with you for America's Voice Live tomorrow afternoon.
They tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to values or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room. In a culture that celebrates the weak, show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
Well, there it is. There it is, 4 o'clock. That means it's closing time and Broad Wall on Wall Street and opening time, open for business, politics, and news right here at RAP. How about Orlando? But take a look at the markets in the meantime. Dow Jones had a very good day, by the way, across the board. Look at this. That was up 740 points, folks. That's a that's a good day. S&P up 118, NASDAQ up 451. More good news, though. Oil prices retreated a bit. Oil was down almost 60 cents a barrel, just approaching that $60 a barrel. Again, gold up. Gold off a little bit. Bitcoin, 109,800 or so. Very, very strong markets across the board. All good news. I'm also in Orlando right now, a little different look to you because I spent the morning with ICE, Immigration and Customs, and then Border Patrol, and the FBI were there, and the DEA was there, and Florida Highway Patrol was there. And they busted a couple of bad guys, some Tren del Agua, bad hombres. We'll get back to that maybe tomorrow. Hopefully I get that to you tomorrow. I have some more video for you tomorrow. In the meantime, very, very good day in the market. My first guest is the White House Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Policy Strategist. Welcome back, May Mailman. May, awesome to have you back. Appreciate your time. Let's talk a bit about the big news. Last week, the one big, beautiful bill passed the House, on its way to the Senate. Senate's got some work to do. What is the president? And I think we hear from the Senate side, there's going to be a lot of work on that bill. President's very happy about at least clearing the big hurdle getting through the House, right?
Absolutely, but also not just clearing the House, but what's in the bill. I mean, pick an issue. You want border security? This bill is a secure border. You want national security? This bill funds not only a robust military, but things like the Golden Dome, which are going to keep us safe for decades. You want to stop funding transgender surgeries for minors using Medicaid money. It does that, adds program integrity requirements, extends the tax cuts, no tax on tips. Pick an issue. This is a great bill. And so the Senate can think about ways to improve on it. And that's something, at some point you run out of time, and Mike Johnson really wanted to get this done. And so there are a few things where just timing wise, it's probably better to put it in the Senate and have them work on it than try and finish up in the House. And that's fine. But this is a great bill.
Agreed. And so you understand, when the folks who watch my show know where I am. I'm a free marketeer. One of the pushbacks of some folks in Congress, in GOP Congress, coming from states like Congress people from Florida and Texas, where they're concerned about the SALT. The SALT in the bill allows New Yorkers and people who are going to fund things that we don't necessarily like. Well, it also has people who don't have state and local, don't have state taxes like Florida and Texas to be funding some of that stuff. And they're upset about that. But I'm with you, May. I mean, let's be honest, folks. When you get a bill this big and you get tax cuts this big and you get drug prices going down this much, you're going to have to take a little bit of the medicine with it, about right?
Yeah. The SALT things, you and I wish that these moderate members or even conservative members in blue states would bring their state along with them and just say, hey, state, how about we have a friendly business climate? Then we won't be a failing state like California, like New York, right? Then we'll be a growing, robust state. And you won't have to charge high taxes because you'll have businesses moving into those states, just like they're moving into Texas, just like they're moving into Florida. Unfortunately, that's just not the way the House works, but the Senate is a little bit different. And then you don't have conservative members in blue states, right? Those conservative members are in red states. So there's just a different calculus coming out of the Senate. So the Senate might make some changes to SALT. It's a huge amount of money, but it's something that was very important to those members. So we'll see what happens. But the ideal situation, of course, is for California, New York, and other blue states to try and figure out what it means to have a robust economy in their state.
I love having May on because you're involved in the policy. It's not just let's hear the talking points, let's deliver them, but you understand the nitty gritty of the policy. I know for a fact that no tax on tips was a huge selling point in the election. Huge. It got so many people jazzed, not only people who are working in the service industry, people who said, that makes a lot of sense. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. There are those now, and I'm just being playing devil's advocate here, May, because I owe it to my audience, because there's a portion of my audience that says, yeah, but what about no tax on Social Security? What happened with that, and what's the White House response to that?
Yeah, it still remains a presidential priority. And so I think it's something that can still be worked on. Obviously, everything is a little bit, it takes some time and moving at the House's speed. So there are other, I think, tax provisions that are still being worked on, from various tax reliefs for building pipelines, energy credits about things that make it easier to build. So I think there are still things that are high priorities. The movie industry also wants some tax relief to help make movies in the United States. So you're not filming a New York film, but in Toronto, that you're filming it in the United States. So there are a lot of other priorities that still need to be worked through. At the end of the day, it's a money thing. I mean, can you find the money? Because we still want to be respectful to the deficit and to our future generations, so that my kids, so that people's kids aren't poor, like that they can still have roads because they're able to have enough money and not just be sending it as debt payments to China. So that's really important too, and just balancing all these priorities.
I'll tell you what, there's a great messaging twist. That answer was fine. I'll take it, right? There's a great messaging twist where you can say this and take it. Run with this, May. Okay, seniors, no tax on Social Security, very, very important. We're still working on it. However, do you understand the biggest tax on seniors? The biggest tax on seniors, bar none, is inflation. And when under 4 years of Biden, you had inflation fly through the roof. So it doesn't matter if you pay taxes on your Social Security or not. You were getting smoked in the grocery aisle and anytime you fill up your gas and everything you do, everything you buy. So, but with Trump's policy, especially this policy, where you're saving more of your own money, lower taxes, but you're bringing inflation down with the energy development, with some of the other programs that are in this one big, beautiful bill, you're going to be better off paying tax on your Social Security and having a financially superior inflation scenario going forward than the last 4 years. It's really a messaging play, and I highly recommend you might grab that one and run with it.
Yeah, and it's not just the tax on Social Security. It's whether you can live on Social Security. It's whether you can actually, you have savings by which to supplement with Social Security. If you have no savings because the inflation was so bad, because you couldn't afford a house. I mean, the whole thing is connected in that if you are unable to afford a house in your youth, then you're not going to end up having savings, and then you're going to be totally reliant on Social Security, and who cares about the tip? So, the taxes on that. So we're invested in structural changes in the U.S. economy that are going to allow people to actually live in America, because there are good manufacturing jobs, because companies have reshored their businesses here. That's why the tax cuts are so important. That's why some of the energy spending is so important, because if we're not energy independent, if we don't have energy jobs here, if we're not producing cheap, reliable energy, then you can't afford to live here. So a lot of these structural changes are so important to us, because at the end of the day, the tax on a Social Security is not going to be meaningful if you don't have a base level of savings to count on.
I'll tell you what, the embracing of nuclear power is a major, major initiative. That is a great, so long in coming. I'm so thrilled Trump is doing everything. Drill here, baby, drill, baby, drill. That's great, and we will. But to embrace nuclear again, we really need to, especially as the world embraces electric vehicles. We're going to need more nuclear generated electricity. We'll never keep up with the demand if we don't. And our power grid. I don't know, but I spent 20 years in the energy industry. Is there money in this bill to upgrade our power grid? Because it is a disaster right now. It literally may need $1 trillion of upgrading.
Yeah, so there are a lot of positive movements on the energy front. So it phases out a lot of these Biden Inflation Reduction Act credits, except for when it comes to nuclear, in which case we still want to incentivize nuclear. This is not your grandmother's nuclear energy. These are small, these are safe, these are sustainable. This is going to power our country for generations. And then, like I was saying, there's a lot of permitting reform that we need. There are a lot of tax incentives that if you're building, also taking away a lot of these carbon considerations. If you cannot build an electric grid, if you can't maintain basic infrastructure in your state because you're so tied up on the NEPA, am I going to hurt a Caterpillar? Or everything is incentivized to build except for grid reliability, then you're not going to have a country. So we're trying to build in those incentives to make sure that the tax structure is aligned with things that are going to keep our country safe and keep our country energy resilient and energy dominant for decades to come.
It's great. I wanted to get into the Harvard issue. We kind of ran out of time, and I know you're busy. We're both busy. I really would love to get into Harvard, and maybe we'll do that again very, very soon. I just hope you go back to them and say, Mr. President, that electricity grid, that grid is literally in shambles. Not his fault, not anyone's fault. It just hasn't been paid attention to for so many years. And we're getting rolling brownouts. We're getting blackouts. A nation this size, $30 trillion economy, we should not have rolling blackouts in our major cities. So hopefully we pay attention to that, and great job with the nuclear as well. May Mailman, appreciate your time, making some time for the Bowling Show and Rav today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. Tax day may have passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble is just beginning. If you missed the April 15th deadline or you still owe back taxes, the IRS is ramping up enforcement. Every day you wait only makes things worse, with over 5,000 new tax liens filed daily and tools like property seizures, bank levies, and get this, wage garnishments. They'll actually go into your paycheck without you agreeing to it, and they can garnish your wages. The IRS is applying pressure at levels we haven't seen in years. The good news, there's still time for Tax Network USA to help. Self-employed or a business owner, doesn't matter. Even if your books are a mess, they've got you covered. Tax Network USA specializes in cleaning up financial chaos and getting you back on track fast, even after the deadline. It's not too late to regain control. Your consultation is completely free. Acting now could stop penalties, threatening letters, and maybe even surprise levies before they escalate. So you got to call 1-800-905-8000, 1-800-905-8000, or visit tnusa.com/Rav. You may have missed that April 15th deadline, but you haven't run out of options. Let Tax Network USA help before the IRS makes the next move. And by the way, before we head to break, very quickly, I want to remind you about that podcast exploding over there. You guys are signing up like crazy. Subscribe to one of those spots right there below. We're all over the Diddy trial. Amazing testimony today. You will not believe the list of defense witnesses that are being called. Kamala Harris is one of them. I'll just leave it at that, and a whole list of others. It's just unbelievable what's going on over there. We cover it on Bowling on Digital. Sign up right there. We'll be back 2.5 minutes. right, Mad Dog. I resemble that picture right there. I resemble that remark. That's Orlando play. I'm in Orlando, and let's do this. Let's do this right now. My next guest, the Chief Executive Officer and Editor-in-Chief of Just the News. Always happy to have John Solomon back with us. You are a star at Rav, John, and star. I'm really in all politics, man. So I wanted to grab you because real quickly, I'm in Orlando. A recommendation that you helped make happen, an ice raid this morning, and
That's exciting.
And tomorrow morning we busted a couple of Tren de la Agua perps, and it's been amazing here. So I wanted to thank you for that and tell all the folks that
what a great experience. It's amazing to watch those guys, isn't it? It's amazing what those guys do day in and day out, busting down doors, picking up bad guys, but they're making the country safer, one gang member at a time.
Yeah, one gang, and it was amazing. The guy tomorrow allegedly is a wanted for murder. So got the bulletproof vest. Now we're going to bring all that to the folks as soon as we can get the video in and get it compiled and have a little discussion. John, other news. Let's talk about news of the day, the stuff you really insanely good with. President Trump paused the student visa interviews at all the embassies. Tell us about that, and also this whole idea where Harvard gets another freaking judge to stop another Trump policy about not allowing them to bring in foreign students. Where does all this stand? Tell us what you know.
Yeah, listen, I think first off, the pause is designed, again, to get at the issues of security. Who is coming into this country? Our Chinese students who have been infiltrating the universities for 2 decades, doing the espionage work of China. Those are things that they're trying to get to the bottom of. So a pause protects the nation until we get better answers. Remember, Joe Biden ended the FBI's China initiative, which gave us eyes onto what these students were really doing when they were on our soil. So for 4 years, we've been blind. A lot of espionage has been carried out. We didn't need the balloon to remind us of that a few years ago. So I think the president buys some time for all the national security establishment to look at who's coming in, why, before we let more people in. In the meantime, you're right, there's an epic battle between the executive branch and the judicial branch. Who will win? I think ultimately the Constitution gives the president the decision of who gets to enter the country. He'll probably win on this when the courts are done. But a lot of the lower courts in blue cities are ruling in the favor of ideology, not necessarily the Constitution. It'll take the Supreme Court to reverse them. But at the end of the day, I think Donald Trump wins even when he loses a court case. Why? Because he reminds the American people that these elitist universities that their children maybe strive their whole lives to get into are more interested in serving foreign populations and foreign donors than they are the American people. And I think Donald Trump's comment this weekend, maybe I'll take the $3 billion and put it into trade schools this weekend. That's the amount of aid that Harvard was getting from the government. That's a winner. People are starting to realize that Donald Trump's trying to force these universities to think about Americans, not cater to some foreign audience that pays the highest price.
It's insane what you just said there. The $3 billion that Harvard gets in aid. Just think for a moment. First of all, Trump tweeted, he truthed over the weekend. I believe it was over the weekend. He said something like 56% of the student body at Harvard is foreign and they're not paying any tuition. Meanwhile, we're giving Harvard $3 billion on top of the fact, John, and you and I both know this, Harvard's got a $62 or $63 billion endowment sitting there, huge. And they don't pay taxes on the money they earn on that money and other things. How much more can the American taxpayer fund this institution that seems to just want to give it away to the foreigners?
Yeah, and also allow a hostile environment for their students. Anti-Semitism was running amok until Donald Trump and others started to make it an issue in the American public. So they harm the students that are on campus that are paying tuitions. They give all these benefits to foreign governments. It doesn't feel that American anymore. And I think that that's the point Donald Trump was making. And even as he loses a couple court cases, he'll eventually win a lot of these at the Supreme Court, as he has all along in the first 4 months of his presidency. He's winning with the American people. He's already winning in the court of public opinion because common sense people are nodding their heads saying, yeah, this is ridiculous. Just like what you said, Eric. They're nodding at what you said. This is an insanity picture.
Crazy. Just crazy. Cut them off. Cut them off. Pay taxes like the rest of us and like the rest of our non-Harvard institutions, including businesses. Trump also got pretty ticked off at Putin. I think he called him crazy at one point. He said Putin's playing with fire and that Russia's situation could be much worse if Trump didn't step in. my concern here, and you know these players very well, John, is that Putin will pay lip service to Trump because he wants to respect Trump. He doesn't. Last thing in the world he wants is another fight, but he doesn't seem to be changing his tactics. He only seems to be upping his game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I think those who are in the intelligence community who give us an honest assessment of Russia, not the stuff that came out in Russia collusion, tell us that because of the threats that Democrats made for 2 decades of putting Ukraine in NATO and moving NATO to that close to Russia, that Vladimir Putin would like to create a 100 or 150-mile radius, a security zone that the West can't penetrate to give Russia greater protection. It's a great fallout from the fantasized, romanticized, but never realistic expectation that NATO was going to move into Ukraine. There was no basic security reason for NATO to be in Ukraine. It was simply a democratic wish list item, but it forced Putin into a different mindset and a different posture. And that's what he's trying to carry out now, get as much land as he can get to give himself a significant perimeter against future Western encroachment. That is how he views it. That may not be the right thing to view, but that's how he views it. He won't you're right, he will pay lip service to Trump because he does want to respect him. He will only understand pain. That's what a bully understands. And I think President Trump is very close to slamming down the pain button. And I think you could see some very serious sanctions, the seizing of some of these illicit oil shipments that are going across the globe, perhaps rolling up some of the assets of oligarchs and Putin himself, the money that they have stored in Western banks, and then the ultimate, the nuclear version of sanctions, a sanction that targets the Russian central bank. Russia's economy is very unilateral, very singular in the banking system. If you sanction the central bank of Russia, you can literally force bread lines to form in a few days. Money and everything will halt. I think Donald Trump's going to start moving through those escalating choices, holding back the last one to see how Putin acts. But I think you're going to see a sanction regime coming aboard really, really fast.
I wonder if that was Freudian when he said the nuclear option available to him in sanctions. I'm not sure.
Listen, there's another reason Donald Trump's acting. There's another reason that Donald Trump's worried. The German chancellor is talking about taking the range off of the missiles that Germany's giving them, meaning that they would be okay. They would allow German missiles to strike Moscow. That is something that has a very dangerous potential to escalate war in Europe. And I think Donald Trump's running against that clock, too, trying to get Putin's attention before something like that happens.
John, do you know? I mean, there's word that the Putin's helicopter was attacked by Zelensky's drones, but the Russian military took down all the drones. Was that true? Was that some sort of propaganda story? Do you know?
It looks to be more propaganda than truth. I can't find any confirmation among the Americans. There are drone attacks. I think some of them were in the vicinity of a few miles of where the president was, President Putin was, but I don't get a sense it was a direct targeting attack. I think both sides know that that's a step too far. But, Russia's on tenuous ground. The economy's not that good, even with the way things are now. So Putin uses a lot of propaganda to keep his Russian people angry and motivated against the West. And I think that's probably a little bit of what happened this weekend.
All right, John, everyone got to watch your show every night at Rav just after.
Thank you.
This to Bannon to John. It's a great show. And you are just in tap to so much what's going on inside the Beltway. Appreciate your time, John. And again, thank you
great to be with you. I love your
set
show.
Up that ride. Thank you, John.
See you.
All right, folks, before we hit a break, I just want to remind you about that podcast I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now. It's exploding right now. It's subscribers all over the place. Love it. Subscribe. It's always for free. You cannot believe the testimony that went on today in the P. Diddy trial. I know we don't talk about it here, but I definitely talk about it over there. The witness list came out, and get this. Kamala Harris is one of the witnesses that P. Diddy is calling on part of his defense. Just think about that for one moment. We dodged the bullet as president. Now we're going to get to hear her word salads again. All right, folks, that's it. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. Well, Mad Dog, that would be Niagara Falls. Again, I'm in Orlando. Sometimes it's, Orlando, it's hard to see, but that looks like Niagara Falls. I think you said it was Niagara Falls, yeah?
Yes, sir. Niagara Falls, Canada.
How many times you been over Niagara Falls in a barrel, Mad Dog?
Not in a barrel, but I've been there a couple of times.
It's a really cool thing to see if you've never seen it, but don't go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. The lack of self-awareness is not surprising, is it? Well, it might be. So NPR actually believes that despite its blatant political bias, wow, is there a bunch of that? We should keep paying for NPR with our own tax dollars. The First Amendment has nothing to do with it. These folks haven't understood the First Amendment in decades, if ever. Just over a year ago, one of their very own outed their bias, and they think that Americans, every single taxpaying American, should have to pay for their bias. They even understand how little trust America has in NPR. First of all, in the news media to start with, let alone a biased place like NPR, National Public Radio. If we hate the media this much, think how much they must even hate themselves. They tried to stop Trump. They've tried to stop MAGA, not once, not twice, maybe even more times. Every element of propaganda, every time they toss aside the core of their profession to spout their lies, they sold their own souls. The Democrat Party and the media they birthed, the entire leftist machine is really in a tender moment right now. And yet, these clowns, these leftist media clowns continue on the same path.
But in this moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack.
Oh, Tim, isn't there a tampon machine in the boys' room you should be changing? I don't know. Here we go again. The left not only learns nothing, but they decide to impart that stupidity to the graduating class of 2025, because why not sprinkle a little bit more of that good old Marxist propaganda on the way out for good measure?
And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts. The fear to speak in America.
You want to know something, folks? I thought that was Tampon Tim Walz. You know who that was? That was 60 Minutes' Scott Pelley. Scott is starting to look and sound like Tim Walz. Insidious fear, says Scott Pelley. Oh, tell us more, sir. What a message of positivity for young adults about to enter the world. Great. Thank you. Insidious fear. That's your message to them. Oh, it was just CBS News 60 Minutes show host Scott Pelley delivering a speech to graduates at Wake Forest University. And instead of instilling hope, he spewed lies. And again, what do they all love to do? Attack President Donald Trump. In case there was ever any question or doubt about where Scott Pelley stands on the barometer of media blatant bias, 60 Minutes has done terrorist bidding. 60 Minutes has participated in proverbial election interference. But sure, let's listen to what his failed actor has to say about fascism and free speech, Scott Pelley. But as always, that's just a leftist stepping stone to what really this is all about, as we all know all too well.
Power can rewrite history with grotesque, false narratives. They can make criminals heroes and heroes criminals. Power can change the definition of the words we use to describe reality. Diversity is now described as illegal. Equity is to be shunned. Inclusion is a dirty word. This is an old playbook, my friends. There's nothing new in this.
What was all this? Diversity, inclusion. What was that? By the way, close your eyes, folks, when you listen to the next Scott Pelley soundbite. Tell me that doesn't sound like Tim Tim Walz. What in the fresh hell was all that dramatic display? So as we work to undo their woke Marxist liberal nonsense, they're actively trying to bring it back to young, impressionable, graduating audiences. And they're not hiding it. Inclusion is a dirty word, he said. But when the left changes words, it's okay, right, Scott? They're perfectly fine with their so-called equity leading to planes falling out of the sky, literally, and crashing into each other on runways. DCA, for example. If they want to talk about free speech, why don't they look back to just, I don't know, not that long ago, a couple months ago, February, when they happily and supportively reported on Orwellian practices carried out by Germany.
In the United States, most of what anyone says, sends, or streams online, even if it's hate-filled or toxic, is protected by the First Amendment as free speech. But Germany is trying to bring some civility to the World Wide Web by policing it in a way most Americans could never imagine.
60 minutes defending the stifling of free speech. What she said on behalf of the leftist machine is that what Germany is doing sounds about, well, wunderbar. Well, it got worse.
In an effort, it says, to protect discourse, German authorities have started prosecuting online trolls. And as we saw, it often begins with a pre-dawn wake-up call from the police.
And then they showed such a raid proudly because this is what they want here in America. So they glorify the German censorship machine for all to see, like the good old leftist propagandists they are.
The worst of the internet is wrapped in red case folders, stuffed with printouts of online slurs, threats, and hate.
This is a criminal offense. So
What does that say?
Kletterpark for Flüchtlinge.
So they're suggesting that the refugee children play in the electrical wires. Okay.
In this case, the accused had to pay 3,750 euros.
Wow.
It's not a parking ticket.
Yeah, not a parking ticket.
But wait, there's more.
Is it a crime to insult somebody in public?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And it's a crime to insult them online as well?
Yes.
The fine could be even higher if you insult someone in the internet.
Why?
Because in the internet, it stays there.
If somebody posts something that's not true, and then somebody else reposts it or likes it, are they committing a crime?
Yeah, in the case of reposting, it is a crime as well.
All these clowns. Scott Pelley represents one of the worst offenders of anti-journalism, CBS News, that repeatedly peddled Russian disinformation about the Hunter Biden laptop. Remember that? Russian collusion story. Remember that? They actively participated in election interference in their obvious edit cover-ups for Kamala Harris, one of the worst presidential candidates in American history. And they continue to tell lies about the current president. Meanwhile, over at NBC, life is not much better. Zero lessons learned, actively peddling lies and propaganda. Trump derangement syndrome is off the charts. How is it that one of the very people who is actively involved in covering up for a mentally and physically ill president, literally as his mouthpiece, speaking to America and the world on his behalf, Jen Psaki, is not only allowed, she's allowed to do it, but she gets her own program on NBC, MSNBC, already a travesty and a spit in the face of all conservative Americans. But then Jen Psaki has on her show, the man who had a heavy hand in destroying our faith and trust in the media, but also the FBI as an institution. And she's rewarding him and asking him about the murder of our president.
Is the law enforcement system and the legal system equipped to deal with what we're seeing now?
Probably there could be changes at the margins, but in the main, we have the tools. There are cultural impediments to doing this work. Let's say you work in the FBI. You know that one of the two political parties is, let me put it nicely, white supremacist adjacent at a minimum. And so why would you want to throw your career on that side of the line and be summoned to Capitol Hill to be asked, why are you pursuing these innocent groups? And so we have a cultural impediment to working it effectively that should get more attention than it does.
So they sit there and talk about creating new laws to stifle Republican progress. That's what they're saying. Lawfare didn't work. Assassination attempts to at least failed. And now we're just going to stomp all over our Constitution and laws, right? Jim Comey, how did that man ever hold a position of power, let alone the most powerful law enforcement institution in the country? And they want to peddle notions about what fascism is. Their answer is, well, I don't like their policies over on the right or their agenda. So you know what? Let's just change the laws. History shows that's called an insurrection, that a country killing fascist revolution, and MSNBC openly not only condoning it, peddling it, selling it. We're showing you your bias, NBC, CBS. Americans are telling you that they're done with the mainstream legacy propaganda media, and yet you really don't see it, do you?
I just don't know what the issues are with us. I don't know. I don't understand the criticism.
They don't get it. They don't get it, sure, whatever. But what they also won't get anymore is our eyeballs. And our eyeballs are money to them. They're not going to get our money. Their bias is clear, and it's time Americans stop footing the bill for their propaganda and utter BS. Back in 2.5. Oh my gosh, Mad Dog, can I get you on the super phone on the
yes, sir.
Speaker? You say Bridgewater, but I recognize that court. I recognize that town. That's Pickleball Court, New Jersey, isn't it?
Well, they're playing pickleball court, but it is Bridgewater. That's the correct abbreviation.
Do you think any of the folks watched our Memorial Day show yesterday, where we talked about all our little interactions about the locations?
I'm sure they did.
Let us know. Let me know on the Rumble chat, the Gitter chat, and the YouTube chat. Let me know on all the chats what you think of our little interactions. It's always good. Always having fun with Mad Dog. Okay, it seems as though Nancy Pelosi's opinion of Joe Biden, well, this changed yet again. It wasn't long ago that crazy Nancy was one of the undercover ringleaders of the operation that booted Biden off the presidential ticket. But recently, old Nancy has much more positive things to say about our former president. Well, listen to this asinine suggestion.
a good place to make whatever decision, the top of his game. Such a consequential president of the United States, a Mount Rushmore kind of president of the United States. Want to know what comes next.
That he belongs up there on Mount Rushmore, Lincoln and Joe Biden.
But you got Teddy Roosevelt up there, and he's wonderful. I don't say take him down, but you can add Biden.
Is she nuts? Biden on Mount Rushmore again. I think the only thing Biden should be doing on Mount Rushmore is assisting the chiselers as they chisel Donald Trump's face and head as the 5th president on Mount Rushmore, South Dakota. The latest cash burning effort from the left represents a new low, even by Democrats. Extremely little standards. Democrat strategist appeared on MSDNC and tried to explain why his party thinks shredding $20 million is going to help them connect with, men voters. Listen.
Yeah, good questions. One, let me save the folks from the Times and all the other great, print outlets some time. If you dig in on what Democrats are researching right now, you're going to find a lot of silly stuff. You're going to find people asking a lot of questions, people asking about syntax and do I drop the G from this word and this and that, and it's going to be a lot of that. So let me just warn everybody, that process is going to be very obnoxious for this 40-something. I would also say, we're really talking about young men, right? Young men who Democrats have not figured out a consistent pitch for how to get in front of. And I think it starts with authenticity.
Good luck with that. Yeah, drop 20 million. You guys haven't figured it out. You just have to just completely abandon the DEI stuff. Just get rid of it. And that was a good example how they're just not ever going to do that. Jake Tapper seems to have finally figured out what that crazy journalism word is supposed to mean. It only took him 56 years. But once again, let's not fall for Jakey's little escapades in his little speeches here. This man has built a career on lying, and now he's trying to build up his book sales, which came out last Tuesday, by doing the exact same thing. Listen to his latest, far too late on air epiphany.
And I think that we need to be skeptical of everything that we are told by people in power. And I mean, that obviously should be the mantra of being a journalist to begin with. If your mother tells you she loves you, get a second source. Right. But we just need to remember that, like, politicians lie, White Houses lie, power is an aphrodisiac. And we just need to all remember that and not take at face value anything that we're.
You forgot one, Jakey. You forgot one. Media lies. Left-wing media lies. Jake, you lied. You shut down Laura Trump when she was talking about Joe Biden's dementia. You shut her down and said she was lying. She was wrong. And now you write a book about how journalism missed it and how politicians, media lie. Jake, you are lying. But you're going to sell a best-selling book. You're going to do it. It's going to be number one. Folks, I think it comes out. I think you release a book on the Tuesday. I believe the following Wednesday, when the author finds out, it's either the following Wednesday or the one after, finds out if they're a bestseller in the New York Times. So all that matters. Amazon doesn't matter. New York Times matters. Jake will be a bestseller again. Yep, we got it. And let me guess, Jake's going to find someone, Netflix, some liberal, one of these liberal streaming services, to do a movie on his book. And the freaking guy lied from the very beginning. He's so full of garbage. I'm just tired. Jake, be honest for once, will you? Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. Let's go, Brandon. When will this guy give up? He is so completely ignorant, incomprehensibly racist, by the way, has a 7% approval rating in Chicago as a black mayor. Think about that. Yet continues to run his mouth, spout his BS out his pie hole. The mayor decided to wish the world a happy Africa Day. Okay, fine. But guess when he did that, folks? He wished the world happy Africa Day on Memorial Day, a day of American remembrance. Listen to this slime come out of his mouth.
Hello, I am Mayor Brandon Johnson, and I am proud to join you in recognizing and celebrating Africa Day. The continent of Africa is made up of 1.2 billion people with diverse countries full of rich traditions, cultures, and heritage. The African diaspora can be found in cities and countries around the globe. And right here in Chicago, our proud African communities have made indelible contributions to the growth and fabric of our amazing city.
People all over the country right now fed up with Brandon Johnson's BS and his Africa Day message seems to be the final straw for a lot of people. Listen to this reaction, which perfectly explains why anyone with a pulse should support whoever runs against Let's Go Brandon Johnson in Chicago next mayoral race.
Imagine being mayor of one of the most violent, crime-ridden, economically unstable cities in America. And instead of honoring fallen soldiers on Memorial Day, you are out here celebrating Africa Day. Like that's gonna fix the south side of Chicago. Whose man's is this? Who sent you?
And I am proud to join you in recognizing and celebrating Africa Day.
I'm trying to understand. Let me get this straight. While Americans are solemnly honoring the lives of men and women who died defending this country, Brandon Johnson is out here with a pre-recorded message talking about Happy Africa Day, as if we're all about to throw on a dashiki and go eat some jollof and fufu.
I want to get this one in because we got Bannon standing by. Brittany Griner, remember her? Joe Biden's favorite pot-smoking Russian hostage, just got caught in a major bashing of Caitlin Clark during a game at WNBA game. Of course, Griner, who he traded the Merchant of Death for, by the way, giving back to Russia for this freaking winner. Well, not chirping about Clark, about her basketball game. In fact, she seems to be most angry about the color of Caitlin Clark's skin after falling out of a recent WNBA contest. Try to read her lips here, but I think you probably can read your lips. Watch that. She appears to be saying, trash effing white girl. Trash effing white girl. You imagine that? Imagine now if it was a clip of Caitlin Clark, the face of the WNBA, saying the opposite about Brittany Griner. The outrage would be immense. All right, hit me up. Let me know what you think about it. We'll be back in 2.5. Bannon on the backside of this break. All right. Asheville, North Carolina, Mad Dog. It's a beautiful part of the country, North Carolina. Very, very beautiful. Really, 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 really good. Folks, how much I cannot wait every single show for this time of the show so I can speak to my good friend, the host of War Room, Stephen Kevin Bannon. Mr. Bannon, I don't know if you have a return on your set, but I am wearing an ICE Immigration Customs Enforcement hat because I spent the early morning hours, pre-dawn hours, and those folks with the FBI, with Florida Highway Patrol, with the DEA, just the 22 law enforcement officers from all different agencies surrounded a couple of perps. Tren de la Agua, bad guys, bad hombres were busted today, Mr. Bannon. We have it on tape, and we're going to bring it to our folks very shortly, as soon as we can get it compiled.
Did you send them to a plane and ship them down to CCOT?
Now that would have been a great idea. We should have just stuck that guy right in the, where's Nancy Pelosi? San Francisco, sticking one for her, one for Swalwell. I mean, there's plenty to go around, right? Everyone gets their own Tren de la Agua gangbanger to take care of.
Well, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have Rogan O'Hanley on about suspending the writ of habeas corpus. Is that President Trump, my strong recommendation, when you're out there with the teams and they're rolling guys up, take them to the airport, put them in a cargo hold, boom, head them to CCOT, let the courts suspend writ of habeas corpus, and let's roll with this thing.
I have an idea. It just dawned on me. Steve Bannon, alum of Harvard Business School. Why don't we get the Tren de la Agua, roll them up and let them go to Harvard? Let them sit in classes with the other progressive liberal nut jobs there.
That would have been that was a great idea last week, but since President Trump just suspended all student visas for foreigners, we got, which is, by the way, a dream come true for me. Come on, give the slots immediately to Americans. I have nothing against foreign students, but it's out of control. I think Harvard's 31% international students. The great majority of those are from representing the Chinese Communist Party, and it's got to stop. And I think President Trump was the guy that wanted to put a green card on the back of every diploma. He's come kind of 180 because he's seen what a mess this thing is, particularly at Harvard, and I think these other universities also, particularly the public Ivies. It's got to go, and American students ought to be taking those billets. Those slots ought to be filled immediately. I think it's 6,000. And the bad guys that you rolled up today, I'd put them on a plane and I'd press the courts. Say, listen, they're going to rule against us anyway. We got to bring this thing to a head. Put them on a plane and send them to CCOT and dare the judges to do anything about it, sir.
Can you imagine that we're giving the federal feds, our taxpayer money, we're giving Harvard $3 billion that Trump is pulling back. We're giving them. They've got $63 billion in endowment. They don't pay taxes on the money they earn, and we're gonna finance foreign students that are come over here and not pay a